Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to round 2 of the Halfords Formula Alpha Championship for the second half of 2022. We're here at Paul Ricard this evening for what should be an exciting weekend's worth of racing. We are currently in qualifying with just under 50 minutes to go, and it is Will Inglis who leads the charge at the moment with a 1:38.1. Very competitive lap there, rivaled only near enough by Andrew Harvey at 1:38.2 as well, and that was a previous lap for both cars, I believe it was. So looking very competitive indeed. You see the speed being carried by Will Inglis there, running down the Mistral straight there, where we see a speed of near enough 300 kilometers an hour. In fact, above 300 kilometers an hour for Will Inglis. 308 kilometers an hour. That is by far and away the quickest car through any of the speed traps. That is absolutely flying. There we go in old money, 192 miles an hour there for Will Inglis. That is some serious pace on demonstration from his Formula RSS Supreme cars here. And it looks like it's going to be quite a hot qualifying session by the looks of things, because we have James Atkins in P3 as well, a 1:38.6. And then we have behind him, we have George Brook-Ratterby, a 1:39.5, followed by Rob Whitney, a 1:39.5. He's made some very good progress throughout this session, actually has Rob Whitney. He was hanging around the 140s just a couple of laps ago in the past few minutes, has really come into his stride by the looks of things. Will Inglis with a very nice improvement there, still securing that pole position for the moment, and just to get some air there actually. Did a very good job to catch that just over the curb. There's not much elevation here. It's also interesting to see the car jumping up that much there, but 1:38 flat for Will Inglis on that previous lap. But as I was saying there, yeah, Rob Whitney, fantastic job in qualifying so far, leading the charge of the AM drivers by a fairly decent margin by looks of things. Yeah, by about a second so far for Rob Whitney, so he will be carrying some confidence into the next session, I am sure. As we see Rob now going towards the end of his lap. Is an improvement through the middle sector. He comes across the line, and it is unfortunately a bit of a loss through the first and third sectors by the looks of things. But we're going to go back on board with Will Inglis as he's gone purple through the first sector, a 47.4 this time around, so still managing to find a little bit of time. And there is Matt Daly. We haven't seen the time from Matt Daly yet, but I imagine he will be in the mix alongside Will Inglis to try and push for that pole position for the first race of this weekend's running. Coming towards the end of the second sector now, and he has lost out ever so slightly. He has Will Inglis, a 16.5, still a very competitive second sector, but not where he wants to be if he wants to really try and push away from the rest of the field. He's currently 0.2 of a second ahead of Andrew Harvey. He's near his rival. He's going to come down the start-finish straight once again, and will it be enough to improve for Will Inglis? It will, by 0.3 of a second. That is a fantastic lap there. That has found, as I say, 0.3 of a second, nearly half a second in fact. In fact, it is pretty much half a second on Andrew Harvey, the car behind his nearest rival. Will Inglis really enjoying the qualifying session by the looks of things. 7 laps down at the moment, the most of any car out there, so he's meaning business certainly in this qualifying session. I'm going to go on board with Alex Smith. Alex Smith looking like he's ready to post some fairly quick times here. Well, I'd like to. Unfortunately, we can't go on board with Alex yet, so we'll have to wait and see till when we can join him here. We'll wait for Matt Daly as well. Matt Daly, another car, getting ready for this qualifying session. Just over 10 minutes to go in the session, so still plenty of time for a few laps for some of these cars, because it is actually quite a short lap here at Paul Ricard, and Will Inglis making it shorter through the first sector as well, a 47.2 this time around. 195 miles an hour towards the end of the Mistral straight, that time around 108 kilometers an hour. That is a fantastic amount of pace from these V6 powered cars there, and he's found some time, or rather he's lost out on his best in the second sector, but still is 0.2 up at the moment as we come towards the end of the lap now. Some of the sweeping left-right-handers left to negotiate with one of the more technical parts of the circuit. Really there's a bit of a number on the tyres, does this part of the circuit, so it'll be interesting to see how they're looking towards the end of the lap and towards the end of the races as well for some of these drivers, where we are coming now through to the final corner with Will Inglis. He's only got the run down to the checkered flag to go now, and it is another 0.2 for Will Inglis. He's really on form now in this qualifying session. There is Matt Daly though, his nearest rival. Well, I say nearest, we don't know yet. Let's see what time he can put. His first flying lap for Matt Daly. We were able to go on board with him, unfortunately. Let's see if I can jump on with someone who might be occupying the same part of the track. I can't unfortunately, yet. I can tell you that Matt Daly has posted a 141 on his first attempt, so not quite up where he needs to be so far. Let's see what he can do. Annoyingly, we can't join Andrew Harvey yet, which I'd really like to, because he has, as I've mentioned so many times before, possibly my favourite livery out of anyone. And yeah, I'd like to go on board with that and have a look at it, but I can't at the moment, so we'll just have to wait and see. But the midfield, as ever, providing this has all gone wrong for Rob Whitney there. Actually, where was that? That was at the first, kind of the second or third proper corner, really. What's effectively the hairpin towards the end of the circuit before the run down the Mistral Straight. That will be a little bit frustrating for him. However, with 10 minutes to go in this session, still plenty of opportunity for some more fast laps, especially with the progress we've seen from him so far. Let's see what he can do. Of course, no real kind of major slowdowns for repairs in the world of sim racing, so that is no major bad news for him in this session. We're going to go on board now with Paul Milan. Actually, he is in the AM running at the moment. He's currently P2 in the AM running, doing a very nice job in the 139s. In fact, most cars now in the 139s, apart from likes of Guy Swarbrick, who hasn't had that many lap attempts in yet. Matt Daly, who's only on, who's had one fast lap. Here we are, Alex Smith and Steve Knight. Alex Smith, by the looks of things, he's done this before. Especially, I think it's Spa is where Spa and Kyle Arm is where it really stood out to me. Apologies, my mic just cuts out there. We have at least got a working mic, though. Of course, if you tuned in to the first round of the touring cars, unfortunately, there wasn't too much going on in the commentary box apart from a very helpful robot. Well, I say very, a slightly helpful robot. Because the microphone decided it wasn't going to play ball that evening, which is a shame because I was using it just earlier that day, so I must have been a little bit, I don't know, heavy-handed when unplugging it or something. However, it's decided to start up again for this session, so no complaints there, as Paul Milman is going to have a couple of complaints as he is down on that lap that time round, losing out, but has a few more to go in this stint in qualifying. But yes, the midfield, as ever, looking fairly tight indeed. And some cars still only getting about 5 or 6 laps in this session so far. We have Will Inglis and Steve Knight with the most laps of anyone at the moment. In fact, George Battersby on his 9th lap as well. It's not the longest circuit in the world. Paul Ricard, only 1 minute 30 on this GT World layout. So even for cars that aren't the most powerful single-seaters in the world, of course, they are still very fast indeed. This is no kind of majorly, kind of seriously long lap, really. As we're going to go on board now, we're going to stay on board with Paul Milman, I think, because I believe he is... Actually, no, I was about to say, I believe he's coming across some interesting traffic. No, he's completely in a world of his own in terms of track space. He has such an huge amount of clear air. He is, I imagine, wondering where everyone else has gone. Who doesn't? Well, that would be Matt Daly. Matt Daly with a 141 at the moment. He has got cars up ahead. Of course, the slipstream will certainly be helpful running down the Mistral Straight, as we see Alan Matthews getting ahead of Guy Swarbrick by the looks of things. Guy Swarbrick now providing with Matt Daly with a bit of a tow here, as he's, I believe, Guy is coming with a bit of an outlap. Hence why those cars have overtaken with such gusto, as it looks to be that George Battersby has had a bit of an off. What has happened there? He's gone in backwards by the looks of things at 170 kilometres an hour. That is going to hurt. That is for sure, as we said with Rob Whitney. Luckily, he's pretty much able to get back on track straight away. So no major real effects from that. 6 minutes to go. Still a few more laps under his belt potentially, as we see Matt Daly now heading through to the final sector. The right-hander coming up, the very high-speed corner. All of these, really, it's only really the final corner where you have to do any kind of major slowdown effort. We have the left-hander here, where you want to go. You don't want to go too tight to the corner, I believe. You want to try and ride over the curbs as much as possible on the exit of the final corner as well, because that allows you to carry just so much more speed there. And Matt Daly goes second fastest with a blistering final sector. He absolutely nailed that final sector, 7/10 faster than Will Inglis on his previous attempt, into the 32s for the final sector there for Matt Daly. But unfortunately, he lost out a little bit. I can't quite make out where he lost out. Through sector 2 was the major slowdown there in the 17-second range, and that's put him 0.3 of a second slower than Will Inglis. In all of this, we've missed, unfortunately. Apologies for that. We've missed the fact that George Battersby has leapfrogged Andrew Brammer in this qualifying session. Andrew Brammer, who was P2, currently P4, so onto the second row of the grid for the moment. Let's see what he can do in trying to catch up to those front runners there within 0.6 of a second of each other. as we see Steve Knight enjoying a bit of a tow from Matt Daly there. Likewise, Guy Swarbrick enjoying a bit of tow from him as well. Guy Swarbrick still not broken that 140 barrier yet. He has gone personal best through the first sector, so let's see what he can do now as we enter the second sector in just a moment. The still very fast right-hander towards the end of the Mistral straight. Not too much of a corner to worry about negotiating in these high downforce cars there. And now that car in front, that Guy Swarbrick I'm sure was quite pleased to have, becomes a bit more of an impedance at this stage in the lap as he goes personal best through sector 2 into the 60s for Guy Swarbrick. That is a very competitive sector 2 actually, as Matt Daly bows out of this qualifying session, perhaps not feeling he can do any more than that. The 137.8 very competitive. But speaking of competitive, let's see how competitive this is for Guy Swarbrick. Still has that car up in front, that might help him on the run down to the start-finish line here. George Brook-Battersby is behind all of these as well, getting involved in this, so still quite a busy lap for some of these drivers here, as Guy Swarbrick still, unfortunately for him, not breaking it into the 139 to 140.5, losing out through sector 3 there big time, a 37 second sector 3. That would have been an absolute flying lap into 138 potentially for him if that went well. However, he does have a couple of more attempts now with just under 4 minutes to go in this session, as we're going to go on board now with George Brook-Battersby. Second in his qualifying session for the moment is Will Inglis out on circuit. Yes, he is. He's currently on an out lap where he's getting ready for what I imagine will be one final charge in this qualifying session. As we see George Brook-Battersby getting ever closer and closer now on the Mistral straight, getting closer to those cars up in front, I imagine, possibly trying to find a way past at this stage. Has certainly got the pace for it, possibly. We'll have a look towards the end of the straight. We'll have a look at the speed trap kind of numbers there. 10 laps on the board, by the way, for George Brook-Battersby now. 305 kilometers an hour for George, and then 303 for Guy Swarbrick. So just a slightly smaller amount of error potentially, but more than likely that slipstream working in George Brook-Battersby's favour now, as we go back on board actually with Guy Swarbrick, as there's all of a sudden a bit of a qualifying battle for me here coming towards the end of the lap now. It's not the biggest circus in the world, as I've already mentioned, so this is to be expected, as we now have the run down towards the final couple of corners on this lap. Guy Swarbrick getting ever so close now to Steve Knight. Steve Knight has to be careful, has to watch out there as we enter the final corner. Steve Knight obviously not wanting to compromise his own lap, but might have compromised Guy Swarbrick's as we now come towards the start-finish line. Let's see what's happened here, and Guy Swarbrick does lose out, unfortunately for him, in the final sector once again. Has he entered the pits? No, Guy Swarbrick hasn't entered the pits. He's still going in this qualifying session. Meanwhile, George Brook-Battersby wasn't able to improve, also losing out in that final sector, so maybe the car's just not able to push to those lower times in the final sector at this stage in the qualifying session, as Steve Knight has made contact with Guy Swarbrick. That is a huge collision gone on between the two there, as they get chucked across that weird kind of what should be a gravel trap, looking very kind of futuristic and a little bit psychedelic. Both those cars getting chucked across. Guy Swarbrick desperate to get out. It's not going to be enough. I don't think he's going to have to absolutely fly it about, and I think by about 5 or 10 seconds it's going to be too little too late for him in this qualifying session. This is all very exciting, as you can hear by the fact that I'm talking at about 900 miles an hour. But meanwhile, Will Inglis, our current provisional pole sitter, is about 0.4 of a second faster than Matt Daly at the moment. Hasn't improved on the previous lap. That is wrong, actually. He has improved on the previous lap. A 137.2. That is an absolutely phenomenal lap for Will Inglis here, and it looks like he's wanting to go quicker once again. We've got a minute to go in this session. Where is Guy Swarbrick on the lap? He's got the Mistral straight to negotiate, and then the final sector. That is actually, by the looks of things, potentially still on the cards for Guy Swarbrick. He might be able to make it round just in the nick of time. I'm sure he's using that push-to-pass system to its full effect. That green light on the air intake there indicating when the drivers are using the system. I believe as well the graphics on the screen should be telling us of that in the race. However, I've never quite noticed that, so either I've set it up incorrectly, I'm too stupid to have noticed, or it doesn't work. But Guy Swarbrick now at the end of the Mistral straight with 26 seconds to go. It's not going to be enough, unfortunately, for him. That is the end of qualifying for Guy Swarbrick. So Rob Whitney then still leading the charge for the AM runs. Provisional pole for Guy, or provisional pole rather for Rob in the AM running. Currently provisional pole for Will Inglis as he comes towards the end of sector 2, and he's ever so slightly down, but can he make it up in the final sector? There's only one way to find out, folks, and that is to stay tuned towards the end of this lap. Now, meanwhile, who else is out? I believe Matt Daly is back in the session, so I thought he was out for the count in qualifying, but no, he is back, which is good to see. So maybe a last-minute charge from Matt. He's lost out in the first sector, 48 first sector actually, so maybe not quite there yet, but let's see as Winnigliss now negotiates the final corner for the last time in this qualifying session. It is Winnigliss on provisional pole. He doesn't improve, but still a very competitive time on the board for him. Let's see who can challenge him now. It is Matt Daly who improves through the second sector, and he seems to be a bit of a final sector specialist. Does Matt Daly in the 32s, as we saw just a few laps ago, running as wide as he dares there, trying to carry so much speed through the final sector. Only 5 laps on the board for Matt Daly, but let's see if that is enough. Let's see if that's enough experience. Let's see if that's enough kind of knowledge to get ready to get used to the circuit. Rather, unfortunately for him, no, it is not. Matt Daly abandons the session and comes into the slightly weird pit entry. From what I've heard from some of the drivers, they are just a little bit confused by the way that this pit entry works. And that is it for qualifying session for the round 2 of the Halfords International Formula Alpha Series. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to bail out a little bit earlier than I'd like to because someone's at the door, which is a slight inconvenience, but we'll be back in just a second for race 1. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to race 1 of round 2 here at Paul Ricard. We are ready and on the grid with just under 30 seconds to go after an exciting qualifying session. It is Will Inglis lined up on pole here. We have Matt Daly P2, George Buckbatterby P3, James Atkins P4, Andrew Harvey P5, Andrew Brammer P6, Alan Matthews P7, Alex Smith P8, Paul Mumman P9, Guys Roderick P10, Steve Knight P11 and Rob Whitney on the grid as P12 for some reason. I'm not quite sure why that is, but that doesn't matter right at the moment because we have 6 red lights on the gantry. The revs have risen and we are away here, and immediately Will Inglis using that push to pass, maybe compensating for a bit of a slow getaway. Meanwhile, Matt Daly absolutely nailed it, as did James Atkins for that fact. But it is Will Inglis who's going to have the inside line here a little bit earlier on the break, so he's conceded position to James Atkins and Matt Daly. Meanwhile, James Atkins got spat off there. I'm not quite sure why that was, and has lost a huge number of positions as a result of that. So it's now Matt Daly side by side with Will Inglis. Will Inglis actually going up the inside towards the hairpin here, and is now ahead of Matt Daly once again. So he's taking that position back, although now Matt Daly's going to have the advantage, the potential of a bit more push to pass, and the advantage of the slipstream as well, as we now begin to enter the Mistral straight here. All the cars occupying that big right-handed, I say here, but it is quite a wide corner actually. And there's been a bit of a collision further down the grid. I believe that is between Steve Knight and Guy Strawberry. Yes, it is. Much like in qualifying, that battle seems to be continuing on. However, Will Inglis slowly but surely pulling away from Matt Daly down the straight. Potentially a bit of a difference in error there, as we see a fantastic move from George Buckbatterby before they enter the long right-hander there, getting the move done on Andrew Harvey into P3. But Andrew Harvey certainly wanting to fight it by the looks of things. He's going to have to settle for P4 though, and maybe focus on keeping Alan Matthews at bay. But yeah, Matt Daly about a second behind now. Maybe we're about to see a bit of a difference in setup between the two cars, where Matt Daly is slightly quicker through the high-speed corners. Meanwhile, Will Inglis able to pull away on the straight. George Buckbatterby is certainly going to work out for him, trying to keep Andrew Harvey behind. He wants that position back as we enter the start-finish straight once again. There's a fairly close train of cars here, and it's all gone wrong for James Atkins once again. It looks to be a bit of a disaster for him on the first lap, maybe the car not warming up as he wanted, and it's been a bit of a handful to drive, hopefully for him by the looks of things. Side by side with Alan Matthews, or is that Andrew Brammer? That's Andrew Brammer he's side by side with actually. And heading into the first corner, Andrew Brammer wins out, takes P6 away from James Atkins. Meanwhile, George Buckbatterby has been able to break away from Andrew Harvey a little bit. Andrew Harvey, meanwhile, battling out with Alan Matthews on occasion by the looks of things, as someone seems to have gone off there. Who was that? That is Paul Milman. Paul Milman's had a bit of a disaster and is in the pits, and has came out of the pits. There is the camera car, but is a huge portion of the track down now. What a shame to see his race start like this, and there's quite a large number of cars on the Mistral straight here. Will Inglis leading them, Matt Daly P2, George Buckbatterby P3 for the moment, but keeping a train of cars behind. Alan Matthews got past Andrew Harvey, and now Alan Matthews has a sight set on George as well. It's going to go up the inside there, actually get the move done, but there is Andrew Harvey. He's dragged Andrew Harvey along with him. They are 3 wide, they make contact, and somehow no one goes off there. That is fantastic to see that no one got spat off at such a high speed as well. Andrew Harvey had a fairly substantial collision with George Buckbatterby on the looks of things, as that got a little bit hairy for a second, and it slightly died down. Now more has it, as we see Andrew Harvey fighting back once again, trying to find a way past George Buckbatterby. We're only 4 minutes into this race, ladies and gentlemen, and it is certainly action-packed, and it's more action-packed now because there go George Buckbatterby and Alan Matthews. Alan Matthews was hit from the behind by George Buckbatterby, who just struggled to get the car slowed down by looks of things. And now Alan Matthews is going to have his work cut out for him, trying to get that car home with that amount of damage. Let's see what he can do in this race now. Currently in P5, but that is a bit of a disaster for him. Let's see how the car handles now as we head into the first corner. It's looking relatively composed for the moment, as he's now under pressure from James Atkins. That's exactly what James Atkins needed if he wants to try and recover throughout this race. Meanwhile, where is George Buckbatterby? He has dropped down by a fairly substantial number of positions, now down into P10 as well, so that's a disaster for him at the start of this race. Meanwhile, in all of this, after his disaster at the start of the race, Will Inglis has been able to take back P1 and is still leading in P1 at the moment, 1.6 seconds clear of Matt Daly. Both of them using that push-to-pass system. Looked like Matt Daly using it for just that little bit longer in an attempt to try and catch up to Will Inglis, but Will Inglis looking very competitive indeed through the first sector, has gone purple, and 198 miles an hour on display there from Andrew Harvey. Actually 314 kilometers an hour is the best of the session so far. That is a fantastic amount of pace under that car there. As we see Alex Smith and Guy Swarbrick occupying the same part of the circuit there. It looks to be that Alex Smith potentially breaking away now through those next couple of corners. Yeah, there we go. The gap ever so slightly increasing now already at about a second in fact, and increasing at quite a rate there. And it looks to be that everyone's actually at quite an electric start, is now at a relatively sensible gap to each other for once, which makes a change, although having spoken too soon, because there is Alan Matthews about 6 tenths of a second behind, or 6 tenths of a second ahead rather, of James Atkins, as we see Willingworth comfortably into the 137s now already with 20 minutes going. There's still a very heavy load of fuel. The tyres though tuned in, working now at their full operating temperature, and that fuel load gradually coming down. He is looking very competitive indeed, is Will Inglis. But speaking of competitive, James Atkins and Alan Matthews looking competitive with each other, as these two still led by Alan Matthews as we come towards the end of the first sector in a few seconds time. And there is James Atkins just taking a slightly different line there to try and find a way past, but has he been able to has that worked? No, it looks like he's gone ever so slightly wide there, although Alan Matthews was in danger of doing the same thing. And Andrew Brammer up in front did go very wide, in fact, as, on the corner before the Mistral straight there, as we see who is looking quite close together. I tell you what, they're looking too close together for Andrew Brammer's comfort there, as we see Andrew trying to break the slipstream, darting across the track there to keep Alan Matthews behind, or trying to keep him behind for as long as possible. But somebody who's doing a very good job of keeping someone behind is Will Inglis. Will Inglis building that gap up rather to about 2 seconds now. So he's looking very competitive in this session indeed. As we see these three starting to, looking like they're starting to form up a little bit, actually starting to kind of form a bit of a train here. As we see in the distance, there is Rob Whitney leading that AM race at the moment from P7. And Matt Daly's actually just put in a blistering lap of 137.6 and has closed up to Will Inglis, it must be said. Now they stand at about a second apart as we get ready to head on to the Mistral straight. Now this is going to be very important, this corner that we're on now. Matt Daly wants to absolutely nail this, try and carry as much momentum as possible onto that straight, get onto that push-to-pass system, stay within that slipstream and start to close up that gap. Has he done so? No, it doesn't look like he has it, or it doesn't look like he's going to be able to. Matt Daly carrying quite a bit more downforce here, which maybe is a bit of a mistake. 296 kilometers now at the top speed for Matt Daly. Meanwhile, Will Inglis in the 308 region, as there's been a collision between George Brookcasby and Alex Smith. That looks things. They are both able to carry on though, so no major ill effects from that, but they are battling it out now as we head down the Mistral straight, as we see a DNF from Paul Milan, which is a shame. George Brookcasby finding a way past Alex Smith. Is Guy Swarbrick wanting to get involved in this as well? He's using that push-to-pass system, but I think he's just slightly too far back unless he's going to be very brave on the brakes. And yes, he is, by the looks of things. Goes up the inside there. Is he going to get George as well? No, George goes up the inside to try and defend from both Alex and Guy, and has a fantastic run out of the right-hander there, and is able to overtake Rob Whitney as well, up into P7 for George. That is a fantastic move there from the British driver. I say British driver, they're all British drivers, of course. This is the Afro Man Roaders Club UK. That's a new one for me there. As we see side by side now, Alex Smith and Rob Whitney. Was that? Yes, it was. Oh no, that might have been Rob Whitney and Guy Swarbrick actually, but they're all so close together that it is few and far between these cars really. As we see George Brookcasby getting a bit of a lock-up on actually towards the end of the lap. Didn't cost them too much though, because these three behind are very much embroiled in a battle now, as we see Rob Whitney on that push-to-pass system once again down the start-finish straight to try and find a way past here, but well defended by Alex Smith. Now what can he do now as we enter the end of the first sector? It looks to be that Alex Smith is actually keeping that gap relatively large and now perhaps Rob Whitty has his focus set on keeping Guy Swarbrick behind, because of course this is the battle for the lead of the AM race now as we come towards the end of the first sector. Good to see Paul able to jump back in, but Alex Smith looking relatively scot-free now, looking like he's been able to break away, as you see Guy Swarbrick taking a much wider line on that corner before the Mistral straight here, but that has that cost him a little bit potentially. That wasn't what he wanted to do, maybe just caught the car in time, but quite a few cars still sat on this Mistral straight. I must say, nearly halfway into this race and everyone's still on the lead lap. In fact, most cars within 30 seconds of each other, and using that slipstream, that push-to-pass system. There is Guy Swarbrick up into P9 now, ahead of Rob Whitty. Let's see what Rob can do to fight back. And actually, if we look at the speed traps here, where is Andrew Harvey? I can't quite make out, but someone has just posted 199 miles an hour. Could this be the first time that we'll see 200 miles an hour from one of these cars? The only other circuit I think that would be possible on is Spa, maybe Baku. I don't know if we saw 200 from there. Either way, this is one of the quickest circuits for these cars by looks of things. And Matt Daly now, once again, I was about to say within a second, now was in 0.3 of a second. He's made a huge gain through the first corner by the looks of things. Let's see what Matt Daly can do now, because all of a sudden looks to be that Willingness has become ever so slightly a cork in the bottle. Looks to be that Matt Daly is now looking very racy indeed as we head down towards the Mistral straight with these two now positions swapping around further down the order. Matt Daly, Alan Matthews rather, dropping down to P5 rather, Andrew Brammer P4, Andrew Harvey P3, and there is Matt Daly still losing out down the Mistral straight by the looks of things. George McFatsby has lost out as well. What has gone on there? I believe he might have just lost the car and has dropped a few positions as a result of that. That is a shame for him, this race not going the way that he would have wanted. Likewise for James Atkins, who we're on board with. He's only kind of looking relatively comfortable actually, because Alan Matthews and Andrew Brammer very embroiled in a battle, it must be said, as they are darting across the circuit down the straight, constantly trading positions, enjoying that slipstream very much side by side now. Who's going to be braver into the first corner? Andrew Brammer is going to have the outside here, and that has worked out for him. However, it's going to be Alan Matthews with the inside. Is he going to go later on the brakes? No. Andrew Brammer rather is going to go later on the brakes. And has he lost out? No. It is Alan Matthews who lost the back end there and just about caught it. That is a fantastic save from Alan Matthews. However, all of this battling has brought James Atkins right back into contention. So after what has been a bit of a slow start for him in this race, it could be the case that James Atkins is potentially on for quite a high point scoring position here, and that will certainly help him in this charge for the championship. Just look at the amount of the understeer on Alan Matthews' car as he heads through the final corner. He did very well to manage that, and has in fact managed it well. He's carried quite a lot of momentum onto the start-finish straight. It is now side by side. It's now ahead of Andrew Brammer here as we head into the first corner. Goes up the inside, does Alan Matthews, and back into P4 for Alan. A fantastic bit of driving with a fantastic bit of car management there, because that car not looking like it is in full race trim, shall we say. Meanwhile, speaking of fantastic management and someone who is in full race trim, are the likes of Will Inglis and Matt Daly, as Matt Daly using that push-to-pass system, now 0.2 of a second behind his main rival in this race so far. 1/10 of a second. He's getting closer and closer. What can he do down the right hand? And now, where is Will Inglis going to try and defend from? Is he going to maybe try and defend the outside? No, he's not. He's going to position himself absolutely perfectly, and Matt Daly is going to copy his every move and is going to stay on him. In fact, he's potentially looking at a move around the outside here, although he's going to do a bit of a switchback, I'm sure, defended by Will though, so he's going to have to work harder than that if he wants to try and find a way past. As we now head into the depths of Sector 3, and it is still Will Inglis who leads, as we see James Atkins losing out to Andrew Brammer. Looks to be that he maybe stuck a nose up but wasn't quite able to make the move stick, as we're seeing quite a few drivers actually struggling to get the moves to stick, but it is making these fantastic battles last even longer. When's the last time we saw this much battling at Paul Ricard? To be honest, actually the last Grand Prix we saw at Paul Ricard was quite good. That is besides the point. Anyway, as we see Matt Daly using that slipstream coming out of the final corner here, was looking like he was kind of teeing himself up for an overtake, but it was too little too late down the start-finish straight. He wants to try the longer straight, the back straight, coming up in just a few corners. Wants to try that again. He's lost out a few tenths of a second actually though through the first couple of corners as a result of his efforts. These two though absolutely in a league of their own at the moment, into the 37s for both cars, about 10 seconds clear of the rest of the field, doing a very nice job indeed. As we see now the halfway point in this race, in the distance, the likes of Andrew Harvey and Alan Matthews heading onto the Mistral straight, but these are the cars that we are focused on at the moment. Both using the push-to-pass system, both trying to keep up with each other, and it is Willingless who's doing a better job of it, as Matt Daly losing out once again down the Mistral straight. He needs to save a little bit more push-to-pass. I think he wants to try and catch up and try to challenge towards the end of the straight here, but it is a fantastic drive from both cars. And speaking of a fantastic drive, Andrew Rammer and James Atkins side by side heading down the Mistral straight. And who's going to come out on top here? Because they are so near enough photo finish close, it looks to me that Andrew Brammer is actually going to have the edge as we head round the outside. Does Andrew Brammer, and has been able to keep James Atkins at bay for at least the next couple of corners. Fantastic drive from both of these cars here. In all of this, we see that Guy Swarbrick has been able to overtake Rob Whitney and now leads the AM race. That will bode well in his championship charge. Speaking of the championship, here's an update for you. Paul Milan, who's obviously had a bit of disaster in this race, leads leads the AM championship rather. Rob Whitney in P2. He wants to try and claw back some points in race 2 if he can, because Guy Swarbrick, his nearest rival, in P3 there. And then Paul Brady, unfortunately not here this evening, and then Steve Knight will be looking to score some points as well. Meanwhile, in the pro running, who we're going to go on board with, or I'm not sure who to go on board with actually, because Andrew Brammer and James Atkins looking like they're getting very ready, very eager rather, to get an overtake done. Likewise for Guy Swarbrick and Alex Smith. Actually, as we see Alex Smith obviously in a different race to Guy Swarbrick, trying to find a way past, but we're going to go on board. No, we're going to stay on board with Guy Swarbrick actually, as he was looking like, actually there's plenty of cars to go on board with now as we head through turn 2 here. A little bit of understeer for Alex Smith potentially, as he now finds his way past Guy Swarbrick in just a few moments time, I can imagine. No, he hasn't been able to actually. Looking like that Guy Swarbrick's car very racy indeed, as we see George Procrastby rather, who lost out just a few laps ago, trying to find his way past once again, and in fact only a few seconds behind Guy Swarbrick is Rob Whitney, so maybe that lead of the AM race not quite as secure as we all thought it was. Someone else's lead who isn't that secure. We're going to go on board with this four-way battle in a second, because it's looking like it's heating up down the Mistral straight, is the battle for the lead between Willie Gliss and Matt Daly, only at about a tenth of a second between the two cars. As we see, George Procrastby has found a way past Alex Smith, who next is going to try and pick off. I don't think he can. Maybe he can catch up to Guy Swarbrick in just a second, as Rob Whitney is just that little further behind, but no, the train going to stay pretty much consistent now, as we see Matt Daly once again very much on the rear wing of Willingliss's car. That has been a fantastic drive for Willingliss so far, must be said. Apart from a very slow launch, making life just a little bit more difficult for him, he has put in the defensive drive of his life here to keep Matt Daly at bay for such an extended period of time. It is fantastic to see, and this will help him in his championship charge, because Willingliss had a bit of a disaster in round 1, lost out for quite some misfortune. As we see, Alan Matthews has been kicked from the race. That's one we haven't seen for a while. Either an infringement of some type of track or some type of rule issue, or potentially just some internet issues, which is a shame to see, as that promotes Andrew Rammer and James Atkins into the next positions, as George Procrastby will be battling out with Guy Swarbrick. Guy Swarbrick now in P8. Alex Smith trying to find a way past Guy Swarbrick. They are now side by side as they get very close indeed there, but no major contact by the looks of things on Alex Smith. I imagine getting slightly frustrated in that car now, dives behind Guy Swarbrick's car once again, actually gets it a little bit wrong going through that corner, and is still behind Guy Swarbrick after all of this. But this is not what Rob Whitney wants. Rob Whitney wanted, I am sure, Guy Swarbrick to be behind Alex Smith, and wants Alex Smith to be somewhere else on track, I'm sure, because Rob Whitney is still very much fighting for the lead for this AM race, as we see so many cars occupying the Mistral straight now. Meanwhile, Matt Daly still not able to find a way past, but getting ever so close, it must be said. Of course, Matt Daly leading the Pro Championship at the end of round 1, whereas Willingliss with 0 points on the board. So this matters to Willingliss, does this race 1 here this evening, as we see Willingliss still keeping Matt Daly behind. That very low downforce setup certainly working for him so far in this race. Is going to be a formidable opponent in the reverse grid race coming up in just a few minutes time, where he will be able to, I am sure, make some very good headway down that long back straight in the reverse grid race as he tries to climb his way back through the running. That gap has been oh so close for quite a few laps now, lower than half a second for quite a while at this point in the race, and it's looking like we could go on till the very bitter end, which will be good to see. It's always good to see an exciting battle continuing on. I'm often we want the races to be a little bit longer because these battles are just so good. As we see Andrew Rama in P4 at the moment, about a second or two, currently just about a second ahead of James Atkins in P5 at the moment. He's had a decent recovery given how the race started for him. As we see, Alex Smith has found a way past Rob Whitney. Rob Whitney has got a little bit wrong by the looks of things. I'm not quite sure where that is on circuit. I can tell you it is actually at turn 1, turn 2, where there's collision with Alex Smith by the looks of things, and that is a bit of a disaster for him. That's not what he needed in his efforts to try and take the lead of the AM running, which he's going to have to wait just that little bit longer for, I am sure now. As we see, someone who's been waiting quite long for a lead in this race is Matt Daly, who we're back on board with now, as we are seeing Will Inglis still doing a very good job of defending 11 laps into this race. In terms of fastest lap at the moment, then it goes to Matt Daly. That 137.6 that we saw before is still the best lap of the race so far, as Matt Daly positioning himself just a little bit differently to Will Inglis on this occasion. Going to go a little bit wide on entry potentially. Yes, he's going to ride over the curbs just to make his car as big as possible in the rear view mirrors of Will Inglis' car. There, we don't need some set of course configuration, thank you very much. And in fact, Matt Daly riding over the curbs of the car, looking like it got up into the air ever so slightly. So this is quite the drive from both cars here, as we see Will Inglis currently in terms of outright pace 4 thousandths of a second quicker than Matt Daly. It's pretty much nothing between these two cars. They are looking like they're going to be enjoying some battling for quite some time in this season, which is always good to see the push-to-pass system being used there on Matt Daly's car, or rather on Will Inglis' car. Have Matt Daly listen to my advice. Of course, I am a race engineer, we all know this. I definitely shouldn't be anywhere near a race car, but 102 miles an hour, who is that from? Sorry, I'm slightly distracted by that incredible top speed. I believe that was Guy Swarbrick that time around, heading down the start-finish straight, was it? Yes, it might have been. No, it can't have been. It's too short of a straight. But for whatever reason, sorry, I was slightly distracted by that speed. It looks to be that Matt Daly has just missed out ever so slightly towards the end of this lap. You see the back end getting away from the car ever so slightly there. Maybe the charge to try and keep up with Will Inglis has just taken the toll on the tyres here, and now they are finally crying out for just a little bit of a break here towards the end of the race. Of course, we now are just under 5 minutes to go in this race, 12 laps in, and it has been a very exciting race so far. I'm certainly looking forward to a very good race coming up in a few minutes' time. But there we see that very close delta between the two cars has now just expanded a little bit as we enter the final stages in this race. In fact, the gap between the cars, apart from these two, looking very close indeed. Matt Daly seems to be just that little bit stronger in Sector 1 by all accounts. The gap between everyone else now expanding ever so slightly as the drivers occupying their part of the circuit that they feel most comfortable occupying, running at their own pace, running into a bit of a groove, settling down just a little bit towards the end of the race, as we see Andrew Rama everything on the 39s there. That is a very nice lap indeed. As we see then Matt Daly potentially just faltering now at this stage in the race, just over 2 minutes to go on the clock, and that gap now standing at about a second. Let's see what he can do. He can still force an error from Will Inglis' car up in front. Who knows? We've certainly seen things change. We've certainly seen races turn on their head pretty much with just a couple of laps to go. It looks like James Atkins is catching back up to Andrew Rama by the looks of things if we compare their pace on track at the moment. James Atkins in the high 138, Andrew Rama in the low 139s. Actually, his best lap, his previous lap must have been about his previous lap better than his best lap at the moment. And there is Matt Daly going up the inside. Apologies, I was looking at the timing after all of this. Matt Daly goes up the inside of Will Inglis. Where was that? That was at turn 1, turn 2. Will Inglis going to fight it back though by the looks of things, where he fought back at the very start of the race. Can he do so at the very end of the race? It seemed to be that Will Inglis was a bit of cork in the bottle for quite some time, and now this is Matt Daly's opportunity to try and break away. What a shame for Will Inglis after what has been an exhilarating race to watch between these two cars actually. Will Inglis finally cracking under pressure, potentially. Maybe his car, maybe his tyres cracking under pressure after such an impressive stint of trying to keep Matt Daly at bay. But that low downforce setup now working wonders for him, using that push-to-pass system, having the slipstream, having the low downforce. He's now been able to find his way back past Matt Daly, but for how long? Just a minute to go on the timing system here. And it is Matt Daly who is back in P2 at the moment, but can he fight back at the very start of the lap like he has done on previous occasions? Near enough side by side through that corner, but not quite enough to make a difference. Not enough to make the overtake stick. Very difficult to make the overtake stick through sector 3. In fact, there's contact between the two as that splits Matt Daly off, nearly splits Will Inglis off, and that must ruin his momentum in this race. Surely that is now the end of this battle between these two drivers. It was only slight contact, the back end of both cars getting away from them there by the looks of things, and that is an unfortunate end to this battle for both cars. But what an exciting opportunity that was for Matt Daly, that unfortunately that just didn't work out in the end. Matt Daly still sat in P2 at the moment after one final valiant effort in this race. It must be said, it looked to be that potentially that was his opportunity to break away and ruin Will Inglis' day, but Will Inglis, ever the gladiator, fought back there and is still in the lead of this race just one lap later. We're now, of course, on the penultimate lap of this race. Meanwhile, looks like the battling is going to be heating up once again here, as we see George Battersby and Andrew Rama slightly closer on this occasion. They have been on the previous couple of laps. Guy Swarbrick and Alex Smith very close, of course, these two running different races, but I'm sure ready to enjoy some battling between the two. They've got no one else to battle, but let's see what they can do in the end of this race now, as we're coming towards the end of the penultimate lap with the leader of the race. The gap between him and Matt Daly standing at about 2.5 seconds. That is not what he wanted, and that is not what Matt Daly wanted, rather, at this stage when it looked like it could have been finally done. The move that was threatened for so long just wasn't going to stick, unfortunately, in the end. I think Will Inglis is, not to take away from his talent behind the wheel. We've certainly seen his defensive drive this race has been spectacular, but I think he has absolutely nailed the setup as well. That setup seems to have worked a treat for him there, although Matt Daly, must be said, has actually posted a very similar top speed time. I think it was it start of the race or qualifying where we saw a blistering top speed trap run from Will Inglis, and that was, unfortunately, perhaps the demise of Matt Daly in this race as we come across some of our first bit of lap traffic. Of course, slightly different, it being Paul Milman, who had to disconnect from the session for a little bit. But other than that, I don't believe we've had a single bit of lap traffic at all, which is good to see. The field looking very competitive in this session indeed, as we see Steve Knight, who will be coming home last out of the AM runners here. Or no, he won't be, of course. Paul Milman will be classified last, but it looks to be that Steve Knight actually looking very competitive indeed into the 141, so he's made some nice progress in this race as well. So it means that race 2, the reverse grid race, coming up in just a second, should be just as exciting, if not even more, than race 1, which has certainly delivered so far. So I'm very much looking forward to that, as I am sure that Will Inglis is looking forward to the end of race 1, heading down the Mistral straight now. Certainly had his work out for him. I imagine he's worked up a bit of a sweat actually in his sim cockpit here, as he now comes toward the end of what will be the final lap, and a well-deserved final lap victory as well. I'm sure we might see a bit of a parade lap here. I know we're going to see donuts from Matt Daly anyway, so I'm sure we'll see some from Will Inglis as well, as we just have a couple of corners to negotiate with the leader of this race. He started the race on pole. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out for him, though. In fact, there's a couple more cars getting ready for a battle here, as Alex Smith using that push-to-pass system, trying to find a way past Guy Swarbrick, but Guy Swarbrick boxing that move off before it could even happen. So we'll have to tune in with that. About a minute down on the rest of the track, rest of the leaders, so we'll have time to in a second there. But it is Will Inglis who comes round the final corner. He started from pole, lost out, clawed it back, and then had the defensive drive of his life to take the race 1 victory, weaving in celebration. Congratulations, Will, for a well-deserved victory, and then congratulations, Matt Daly. Commiserations as well for P2. I'm sure you can still be happy with that amount of points, but what could have been for Matt Daly in the race, a phenomenal battle between these two leaders then. And there are some victory donuts, and there's another collision from Matt Daly. Bring in Netflix Drive to Survive, folks, because that is some drama for this season. No, they are all just enjoying the celebration. And congratulations, Andrew Harvey, as well. In all of the action, we didn't, unfortunately, for you, catch too much of your race, but you had a very good race. and rounded out the podium in P3 there. So well done, Andrew, for a cracking race in race 1. James Atkins comes home P4, a very good recovery drive indeed for him, as we see George Battersby P5, Andrew Manor P6, and Guy Swarbrick will, by the looks of things, win out in the pseudo battle. Of course, the battle that shouldn't really have happened. Will be coming home P7 here to take away the AM race victory. Congratulations, Guy, as you carried on your charge towards the championship lead in this season so far. Of course, we're only on round 2, but there is Adam Smith coming home P8. Rob Whitney takes home P2 in the AM running. Stephen Knight takes home P3, and then I believe Paul Bowman will be classified P4 there. So let's see, as all the celebrations have now come towards the closure by the looks of things, as has race 1. What a phenomenal race. No, it hasn't. There we have Andrew Harvey enjoying some donuts there towards the end of this race, getting those tyres, I imagine they're going to use the same set, getting those tyres nice and warm for race 2, because that is exactly what you want to do to your slick tyres there. But that was a fantastic race 1. The battling certainly was an exciting sight to behold. So that is boding well for race 2, the reverse grid race, coming up in just a few minutes' time. I will catch you in just a second.
And welcome back to the action, ladies and gentlemen. With just over 10 seconds to go until lights out. It is Alan Matthews on pole, Alex Smith P2, Andrew Brammer, George McCratsby, James Atkins, Andrew Harvey, Matt Daly, Whitley Gliss, Paul Millman, Steve Knight, Guy Swarbrick and Rob Whitney. A bit of a quicker rundown for you as the revs begin to rise. We have 6 red lights on the gantry and we are away. Alex Smith using that push to pass on launch. We've seen a few. It seems to be maybe a bit of a split down the running as to whether or not that is kind of preparable on the launch here, but it certainly worked for Alex now as he has the run down to turn 1. He has the inside line as well. Is going to squeeze Alan Matthews ever so slightly and is up into P1 as a result. Meanwhile, George McCratsby side by side with Andrew Brammer now as he leads that train. Andrew Brammer tries to fight back. There's contact between the two. Luckily, no one going off there, but there is Matt Daly in P6 as well. I was going to say, actually, we've had quite a nice mix with that reverse grid race. I think the order was kind of quite competitive drivers who were with each other there, so this should bode well for a good race here. But Alan Matthews is currently in P2 at the moment, trying to catch back up to Alex Smith. Matt Daly in P5 meanwhile, and there's a huge train, a huge slipstream and a huge push to pass train as well as we see. I believe that is Whitley Gliss getting the move done on Andrew Harvey, now setting his sights on James Atkins. Meanwhile, Alan Matthews using that push to pass and slipstream has found his way back past Alex Smith. Let's see how this battle develops. I imagine it could be quite similar to the battle between Matt Daly and Whitley Gliss. Speaking of the battle between Matt Daly and Whitley Gliss, that is not the way that it went in race 1. That has been catastrophic for both of those cars. In fact, all 3 of those cars, Andrew Harvey involved in that as well. 3 of the quickest cars in the weekend's running so far, in terms of qualifying and in race 1. In fact, that's the entire podium from race 1, have been basically knocked out of the running this early on in the race. Just look at the state of Matt Daly's car there. The tyres very much overheated, and there's contact once again between Andrew Harvey and Matt Daly. That is a disaster for every driver involved in that collision. That has really put a damper on their race. I think Whitley Gliss was looking a little bit more able to carry on, but was going to have to dive into the pits as well. That is really going to turn things on their head in this reverse grid race. It's basically a reverse grid race, because just as they were climbing away through the order, they've now been left with some slightly ruined cars at the back of the field. Alan Matthews just about keeping it on track there, currently in the lead of this race. Alex Smith, his nearest rival, is in the meanwhile battling with Andrew Brammer. Andrew Brammer currently in P3, make that P2 as we now enter the final part of Sector 1. Matt Daly, Whitley Gliss still stuck in the pitch. George McCratsby meanwhile seems to be losing positions there as James Atkins in P7. This is a huge train now forming up, being led, I believe, by Rob Whitney. Rob Whitney currently leading that AM race in P4. A very good job there as he enters the Mistral Straight once again. Actually with a little bit of a gap to Paul Millman, P2, and then we have Guy Swarbrick P3 in the AM running as well. So all AM runners now, this AM battle should be quite exciting indeed as we see Guy Swarbrick finding his way up into P2. There is going to be near enough side by side. In fact, never mind side by side, it's going to actually go ahead of Rob Whitney. That push pass system working wonders there. That slipstream really benefiting him as we see Rob Whitney wants to fight back now, but it is all of a sudden Guy Swarbrick from P3 in the AM now leads the AM running. Rob Whitney actually going very quick into that corner there to try and claw back that position. Can he? He's going to make Guy Swarbrick go the long way round if he wants to keep it, and there we go. Rob Whitney boxing off, fighting back, switch around, working well there for Rob. Back into the race lead for Rob. Speaking of the race lead, it's being very hotly contested at the moment because it is Alan Matthews who leads the pro running at the moment. Andrew Brammer in P2, only a few tenths behind, and there is Alex Smith also involved in this, but losing out towards the end of that lap, I believe. Yes, losing out through sector 3 there. But after Alex Smith seems to struggle to make his way through the running in race 1, has really came on form. Start of race 2 here. Alan Matthews leading the charge at the moment, then Andrew Brammer in P2. George McCratsby meanwhile has found his way past Paul Millman. Paul Millman settling into P3 in the AM running, and Rob Whitney settling into P1 in the AM running as well. Guy Swarbrick trying to put a stop to that, I am sure. But what an exciting start to this race it has been, ladies and gentlemen, and it's looking like it's going to get that a little bit more exciting now as we see George McCratsby trying to charge his way through the running now, where he has the benefit of that slipstream down the Mistral Straight. And in fact, we've got quite the pack forming up once again. It's 5 cars in a train here. Guy Swarbrick on that push to pass system. Let's see what he can do now as he tries to catch back up to Rob Whitney in a very similar fashion to what happened on the previous lap. Can Rob Whitney fight it back though? Because it's happened earlier on for Guy Swarbrick. That should give Rob Whitney a little bit more slipstream, maybe a bit more momentum heading into the corners through Sector 3. We know Rob Whitney seems to be quite strong through Sector 3, but someone who seems to have struggled in Sector 3
is Alan Matthews. Alan Matthews losing out to Andrew Brammer. Andrew Brammer, I believe for the first time in a little while, is currently in the lead of a race, which is good to see. Where is he in the championship at the moment? He's currently he's in the mid-pack in the championship at the moment, so this could be exactly what he needs to try and bring a bit of a championship fight to light, potentially, especially as we're only on round 2. It's anyone's game at the moment. Andrew Brammer leading this race, and Alan Matthews P2, Alex Smith P3, George Pratsby meanwhile sat in P6, as there's a huge amount of battling going on down the start-finish straight. Now side by side, Rob Whitney and Guy Swarbrick, the battle for the AM race carrying on, as hopefully we will see it go towards the end of the race. Guy Swarbrick just about winning out here, underbraking, takes the lead back from Rob Whitney. Meanwhile, Rob Whitney now all of a sudden under pressure from George Batterby potentially, so this AM race really kind of embroiled in the pro race as well. It's all going on here, folks, as we now come towards the end of Sector 1. Only the big long sweeping, or not that sweeping, long right-hander hairpin pretty much to negotiate before the Mistral straight, where we'll see who is on the ball in terms of carrying the momentum onto the straight, who is on the ball in terms of shifting it precisely at the right moment, who is on the ball in terms of using that push-to-pass system. Guy Swarbrick currently leads this pack in P4 at the moment, using that push-to-pass system. There goes Guy Swarbrick. Rob Whitney potentially saving it for later on down the straight, or later on down the lap. There is George Batterby in the middle of it all. About 0.8 of a second behind is Paul Millman under pressure from James Atkins. James Atkins now fancies getting involved in this battling, as we see George Batterby finding a way past Rob Whitney. Maybe Rob Whitney a little bit too late on that push-to-pass system, because that could spell disaster for his charge towards the AM race lead, because even though they are in separate races, having that car, having that gap, that barrier will help Guy Swarbrick out immensely here. That second barrier that he currently enjoys, that second and a half barrier that he now enjoys to Rob Whitney. Meanwhile, James Atkins still not quite able to find a way past Paul Millman just yet. What is their current pace looking like? In fact, they're pretty much neck and neck. Paul Millman and James Atkins in terms of pace at the moment. 140 from the mid 140s for both cars. Winningless, they're currently in P11. What a disaster for him in the race 2. Reverse good race for him. Currently setting purple sectors, but all the way down in P11 after having to pit to repair the car. What a shame for him. We might be able to see him claw his way back to some point scoring positions potentially later on in the race. Guy Swarbrick then still leading the AM charge under pressure from George Batterby there, as he tries to find his way up the inside there, a little bit too far back though for George's liking. Meanwhile, James Atkins in P7 losing out to Paul Millman there. I'm not sure, we just went a little bit wide there. There was contact actually between the two cars. No major ill effects by the look of things though. Paul Millman still ahead of James. Still in P3 in the AM, running just a little bit further behind the others at the moment. Andrew Brammer then doing a very nice job of leading this race, it must be said, about a second clear of Alan Matthews. And with, we're not quite at the halfway point yet, this could go on for quite some time, which will be good to see. Who is quickest in terms of the speed trap at the moment? It is Guy Swarbrick. We saw his car looking very competitive indeed towards the end of race 1, and here we have it in race 2. That car is looking blistering down the Mistral straight there, 316 kilometres an hour, I believe. That's only a couple of kilometres off 200 miles an hour. In fact, I'm going to get my calculator out and do that calculation for you. I am the jack of all trades. I am pit engineer, commentator, jack of all trades, master of none. Really, here as we see Andrew Brammer still leading the race at the moment. That gap is staying fairly consistent actually. Actually, the gap between Guy Swarbrick and Rob Whitney has certainly closed up, as Rob Whitney is now going to fight back for the lead of the AM race. The AM race really delivering in race 2 here, it must be said. This has been some fantastic viewing as we see Rob Whitney looking to go side by side. In fact, he's carrying more speed. Both drivers on the push-to-pass system. They are now side by side. Rob Whitney's going to be able to get the overtake done. Is he? No, he's not. Very well defended by Guy Swarbrick there, entering into turn 1. As we see the back end of Guy's car just getting a little bit upset actually as he rides over the curb, potentially taking too much curb, and that will potentially hamper him on the run down to the hairpin. No, I think he's just about got it nailed. He's just about safe enough this time round, but this has been a fantastic battle. The 3 AM runners all within succession of each other, all within a second of each other, and Guy Swarbrick goes just a little bit wide. That's going to give Rob Whitney the inside there. Guy Swarbrick potentially not quite expecting that. There's contact between the two, and there goes Guy Swarbrick being spat off there onto the infield. What a shame for Guy in this race. That pretty much takes all the momentum away from him, going from the lead of the AM down to P3. What a shame for him in all of this as well. Alan Matthews and Andrew Brammer have started battling it out, as you see Andrew Brammer taking the position back on the right-hander down the Mistral straight. Alan Matthews settling for P2 for the time being, but for how long? 201 miles an hour down the speed trap. For who is that there? I believe that is for Guy Swarbrick now registered. Yet we have now gone plus 200, folks. That is fantastic to see. These cars really delivering. They are looking so capable, yet so raceable as well. Fantastic race cars, these RSS Supremes, making even Paul Ricard here in Le Castellet look exciting, which is no easy feat, that is for sure. As we see, only 0.5 of a second now between Alan Matthews and Andrew Brammer. Andrew Brammer into the 138. We haven't seen a 137 special so far in this race from the likes of Matt Daly or Will Inglis, of course. Matt Daly retiring and Will Inglis hampered by a fairly substantial impact, so I'm not quite sure we'll see those blistering, dizzying lap times, those 137s that were just so impressive so early on as well in the race there. So that'll be one to watch out for. Let's see who can take the best lap of this race, with some of the front runners effectively out for the count here. As we see Andrew Harvey actually coming out of that three-way collision relatively well. In fact, only 15 seconds behind the rest of the field. Let's see what he can do towards the end of the race. Speaking of, let's see what someone can do towards the end of something. That's a very weird segue from me. Let's see the end of the Mistral Straight now, where we have Alan Matthews and Andrew Brammer side by side here. That push-to-pass system, that slipstream working to Alan Matthews' favour there. They are still side by side. In fact, can he box him off? No, he's going to have to go a little bit wide to give Andrew Brammer the room there, but he's still leading this race so far. But Andrew Brammer up the inside. That's a fantastic move from Andrew there to take the lead of this race back. Absolutely phenomenal driving there. Really demonstrating some bravery, and there's contact between the two. We've seen it at that corner on a couple of occasions now, I believe, or certainly in this part of the circuit. That gives Alan Matthews P1, but I believe he's going to wait up for Andrew Brammer. That is fantastic, fantastic sportsmanship on display there. You don't see that in Formula 1 all that often. This battling, though, and especially that collision, has slowed. I was about to say has brought Alex Smith into the play, but that was something. That was quite the entrance on camera, Alex. You could have just maybe waited and we would have switched you and you would have got some more screen time. But you wanted to make sure you'd certainly got some, so flash across the screen at about 4,000 miles an hour. That is one way to do it. And there is. I'm gonna have a brief aside here. Unfortunately, I can't go on board with myself. I can. That is not the camera angle that I wanted. That is. Nope, we'll ignore that. I just wanted to highlight once again, you might have caught it ever so slightly, that fantastic pit entry there, which involves a little bit of rallycross. I often make the joke about how it's not just racing against rallycross or someone's partaking in some rallycross, but all drivers this weekend have to partake in some rallycross. Really testing out the suspension on these RSS Supremes well in order to enter the pit lane here. As we see, Paul Milman, currently P5 at the moment, has his sights set on Rob Whitney. This is now, of course, the battle for the lead of the AM race, currently being led by Rob Whitney. Paul Milman wants to try and make headway into that, but he's under pressure from James Atkins. Both of them using the push-pass system. Both of them now side by side. Alan Matthews has found a way back past Andrew Brammer, in fact. Let's see as they head through Sector 3. Will we see contact between the two again? Hopefully not, of course. Both of them recovering very well and dealing with it in a very sportsman-like manner. There looks like Alan Matthews trying to carry just a little bit too much speed through the corner there. Was able to get back on tarmac with... Well, I say get back on tarmac. It's Paul Ricard. Everything's tarmac. I mean, as far as the eye can see. But be able to get back within the two white lines as quickly as possible. There, and Alan Matthews still leading this race then, but for how long? Because I am sure that Andrew Brammer is going to put a bit of a charge on and try and catch back up there, as we now have a bit of a three-way battle forming for the lead of this race. Once again, George Batterby, who we haven't seen too much from this season. He has been sat in P3 in the standings. There, Matt Daly, very clear of everyone so far after a phenomenal weekend in round one. But George Batterby looking to make some good headway into the standings, I am sure, because our championship leader is absent from the second race of this round. 68 points Matt Daly currently sits on after race one. Andrew Harvey is now P2 and the championship has leapfrogged Alan Matthews, but is going to struggle with that, so Alan Matthews should be taking that back in this race. In fact, we have pretty much a four-way battle for P2 in the championship at the moment. James Atkins, George Batterby, Alan Matthews and Andrew Harvey all within a couple of points of each other. In fact, involve Will Inglis in that. It's all very close in the championship standing at the moment because we are so early on in the season, so it's going to change around a little bit towards the end of this evening's running. And meanwhile, Paul Milman leads the AM running at the moment, is currently in P2 in the standing as well, so the battle between Paul Milman and Rob Whitney, who the battle for the lead of the AM running is in both the race and the championship standings, will be very, very enjoyable to watch in this race, that is for sure. as we see another battle, very enjoyable to watch, the battle between Alan Matthews and Andrew Brammer. Much like the battle between Whitney Bliss and Matt Daly, this has gone on for quite some time now, and it looks like it's got no signs of stopping. And I wish we didn't have to stop, but we've only got 10 minutes to go in this race. As we see Rob Whitney and Paul Milman only 0.4 of a second apart now. That gap has built up ever so slightly. I think James Atkins just had to get past Rob Whitney, just slowed him up ever so slightly. Could that prove disastrous in his race? Is there only one way to find out, and that is to stay on board with this exciting battle between these two cars. In terms of outright straight line speed, that goes to Paul Milman. Looks to be that Rob Whitney using a little bit more downforce down the straight, but might prove to be slightly detrimental, as we saw for the likes of Matt Daly. And then we have these two being very close indeed. These two are pretty much the closest on track at the moment. But yeah, as I said earlier on, just how close this battle is, just how close some of this battling is, if you ignore the cars that were unfortunately suffering a bit of an incident earlier on. We have got a very close field indeed. If we go down P1 down to P8, covered by only 25 seconds. And of course, Guy Swarbrick also involved in a collision. If we ignore all the cars involved in Silverborn's collision, only separated by about 15 seconds here. So a very close field indeed. Top three separated by 2 seconds. Very close, as seems to be the theme of the evening. All three cars within camera shot. The podium here still undecided, just under 10 minutes to go in this race. As we see now, the gap between the two leaders still within a second there. Just entering the background rather is James Atkins, about 10 seconds behind. But just goes to show just how close this field is, because James Atkins fronting up a bit of a pack as well. Of course, the main meat of that pack being Rob Whitney and Paul Milman, separated by about 0.8 of a second now. So that gap looking a lot bigger than as soon as I say it goes down to 0.5. So that gap kind of a bit like an accordion, expanding and then retracting as they head through certain parts of the circuit, but looking very close indeed. This battle could be one of those ones, much like the battle for the lead of the pro running, that's going to go on to the very end. Some very competitive drivers in this half of the year's running, that is for sure. Alan Matthews then in P1 at the moment. George Batterby has found a way past Andrew Brammer after Andrew Brammer looked quite comfortable in the lead of this race for quite some time. All of a sudden he's down in P3, and Alan Matthews might be joining him down in P2 because George Batterby has an immense amount of speed underneath him heading down the Mistral Straight this time round. Up into P1 for George this time round with relative ease, it must be said. Speaking of someone who's got some pace down the Mistral Straight, I was talking about that low downforce setup before. Paul Milman finding his way up into P5 ahead of Rob Whitney now, but for how long? Because Rob Whitney is certainly going to want to fight that back as we now enter the final few minutes of this race. A little bit of understeer potentially for Paul Milman. Of course, one of the downsides of using that low downforce setup, which will allow Rob Whitney to try and fight back. A big lockup for Alan Matthews here, makes contact with George Batterby, does a very good job of no major no serious loss of time there. No one spinning out, no one's race too majorly affected there, although by the distance George is carrying some damage. So let's see how his pace continues as we now enter the final stages of this race. Andrew Brammer, meanwhile, I imagine was delighted to see that around the final corner, but hasn't been able to make the move stick, unfortunately for him. The top three separated by 1.6 seconds now, as we see Alex Smith actually finding a way past Rob Whitney now as we get into the final stages of Sector 3 at that point of the lap. Rob Whitney potentially dropping off there, might have made a bit of an error, not quite sure, but that is exactly what Paul Milman wanted as he tries to bring it home in the lead of the AM race. In fact, the gap between Rob Whitney and Guy Swarbrick looking that little bit smaller. I'm not sure if Guy, with the pace that he has, is going to be able to make up 13 seconds with 5 minutes to go, but you never know. Let's see what happens in the final stages of this race, as Alan Matthews will start to feel the effects of that slipstream potentially. No, Alan Matthews carrying quite a bit more downforce than George Batterby, who has enjoyed a top speed of 316 kilometres down the Mistral Straight, 205 miles an hour there for George. That is absolutely fantastic. That's absolutely what he needed to to try and usurp the lead of this race from his nearest rivals. As you see, Alan Matthews there doesn't look like he's got the most straight line speed, and doesn't look like he's got the most front end grip as well. Look at just how much steering lock he's having to put in to make the car go around like corners at any form of decent pace. That is an issue that only compounds itself because as the tyres are getting hot, they lose grip, you lose grip, you turn it more to try and keep the speed up, and then you get hot, and then you lose grip, and it's going to keep being a horrible repetitive cycle. And then you might involve factors like lockups, which only exacerbate the issue. So let's see how Alan Matthews manages this in the later stages of this race, because I imagine he's probably more focused on keeping P2 at this stage, keeping that second spot on the podium, than he is on taking the outright lead of this race. But Andrew Brammer looking very competitive indeed. The car behind, both of them posting a near identical lap time on that previous time round. In fact, if we compare best lap times, Alan Matthews does win out in that regard, but doesn't seem to have that quite have that pace at this stage in the race. Just under 5 minutes to go now in race 2, and what an exciting race 2 it has been. Much like race 1, it certainly delivered has round 2 at Paul Ricard. Not often that you could say that Paul Ricard has been a fantastic venue for the upper echelons of single seater racing, which of course the AROC Racing Leagues is. But that might be more to do with the old school F1 cars that we were enjoying watching for the past few years. It'll be interesting to see how this weekend, how the new style Grand Effect era cars negotiate this circuit. Of course, this being a very different, very new era for Formula 1, of course, we follow the calendar about. In fact, we usually tend to be just a little bit further ahead of the Formula 1 calendar, so we're always a step ahead here at ARL. Which is good to see, of course. If you want to try and see if you are a step ahead yourself, you can try a look on the Pirelli Sim Rigs National Alpha Day coming up in just a few weeks' time. If you haven't already, make sure you've got your tickets. I'll be trying my best to get down there. If I said it, I quite literally told Guy I wasn't going to say it. If a couple of issues with the Mito are able to be resolved by then, because it's being a little bit temperamental at the moment, and fuel costs obviously providing, hopefully sorted by then as well. But yes, National Alpha Day looking like it should be a fantastic one, so why not try a hand on one of the F1 rigs in the F1 rigs, the Pirelli Simulator rig. Here at National Alpha Day at Bicester in just a few weeks' time. Just under 3 minutes to go in this race now, and all the cars starting to occupy a slightly more comfortable segment of the track that they can settle into a bit of a groove in. As we see Alan Matthews spitting flames on the overrun there, that is very cool indeed. As we see, these cars just able to occupy a slightly more comfortable part of the track where they get a bit of blessed relief, I'm sure, from some battling, because everyone working up a bit of sweat, everyone working quite hard in both sessions, in fact qualifying as well, and some track beforehand in this evening's running. Of course, it was very interesting indeed. It was last week's running of the touring cars, which you weren't, I'm sure, to much to the pleasure of some of you, much to kind of the relief of some of you, weren't able to hear my voice. For once, I was forced to shut up owing to some mic issues, and I wasn't able to repeatedly shout about what was going on screen. Instead, I was able to sit back and watch, which was very nice indeed. I'm still controlling the camera, of course, but it was quite interesting to see how the dynamic of practice and everything works with that series. So in a week's time, tune in for that, because I don't know where it's going to be. No one knows where it's going to be, but tune in for that, for the Random Lottery Touring Car Series in the Giulietta TCR in just a week's time. And then in a fortnight's time, we move on to the next round of the single seaters coming up in 4 and 9 there. So plenty of racing action to come still from the AROC Racing Leagues. Only just started these 2 new seasons, and not much racing action left in this evening's racing, unfortunately, after it has been so exciting. It looks to be that was under a minute to go, just over a minute to go rather, on the clock. We are winding things up. Of course, Anna Matthews still fighting against Andrew Brammer as we head through towards the end of Sector 1. Is this? Yes, it is. I'm not completely blind. Am I completely blind? I might be completely blind. Where are we? Where are we on track? I've completely lost my bearings. I do apologise. No, we are coming toward the end of Sector 1. Ignore me now on the straight. About half a second separating these two now. It looks to be that Andrew Brammer has the upper hand in terms of straight line speed. Can he close up this gap between splitting at about 6 tenths of a second, 5 tenths of a second, 6 tenths of a second once again, as Alan Matthews introduced a bit of a weave here to try and, I imagine, 90% break, 10% intimidate the car behind, I like to imagine. They're a little bit of a more kind of show off a little bit of a peacocky kind of move there to really intimidate the car behind or the cars you are battling with. As we see, George Brocklesby, after making the move a few laps ago, has had quite a comfortable lead now. I say comfortable, about 3 seconds, which is a fairly wide margin given how this evening's running has gone. That car not looking quite as racy as it was a few laps ago. Maybe the tyres really dropping off at this circuit after a certain number of laps, because it is quite high energy, quite high speed. As the timer hits 0, will we actually get a penultimate lap before? We know we won't. There is now the final lap for this evening's race. It wasn't quite able to make the start-finish line, unfortunately, for us, so this will now be the final lap of this evening's running. And I think we'll stay on board with George Brocklesby for this one, because it has been a well-deserved victory from pretty much nothing. Probably no one really expected it in this reverse grid race. We haven't seen too much from George in this evening's racing so far. He had some decent pace underneath him in race one. He made a few moves stick, well, battling it out with the leaders of the AM pack. Roughly that's where he's going to sit, but after some misfortunes for some other drivers, he finds himself in the lead of this race now. He heads down the Mistral straight, rather. Is actually going to lap a car here, and we'll go on board with Paul Milman, who's only 20 seconds behind actually, because he has done a good job of leading the AM running as well. As we see George heading down a very long straight indeed. Can we go on board actually? I quite fancy going on board. If we can. No, we can't. We're going to look at a 75 instead. Apologies. Let's amend that quite quickly. There we go. No more looking at a 75. Unfortunately, as cool as they are, that was what last year's touring car running was for, if you fancy going back and watching some of that. And Andrew Brammer has, in fact, been able to overtake Alan Matthews. That seems to come from nowhere. Alan Matthews, the back end, looking very unsettled on that car. There's contact between the two once again there. That is a bit of a disaster for them both. We're going to lose out some time, but I don't think that is actually as bad as I quite made it out to be. As we're going to go back on board with George Brocklesby as he heads round the final corner for the final time at Paul Ricard this evening. This evening's running. Congratulations, George, after what is a very well-deserved race to victory. This bodes well for his championship charge as he finds his way through the pack, just winning on outright pace there. No kind of big kind of events to talk about from him, where he just capitalised on a few other people's mistakes and found himself taking home the race to victory. Andrew Rammer coming home P2, Alan Matthews running out the podium P3, James Atkins at well-deserved P4. Once again, that is 2 P4s, I believe, so that is a very good haul of points for him this evening. And Paul Millan will be taking the AM race victory. Rob Whitney taking home second spot on the podium, and then Guy Swarbrick will be coming home P3 on that podium as Alex Smith finds his way around for P7 as well. A bit of a shame from Alex Smith this evening, actually. He looked quite competitive in qualifying, but unfortunately I don't think that lap ever materialised, and the pace didn't seem to be there, unfortunately, for him. Still better look next time. Let's see what he can do in some further races, as Guy Swarbrick will be coming home P8, Steve Knight P9, Andrew Harvey heading down the Mistral straight. What a disaster for Andrew Harvey, Winningless and Matt Daly. A huge collision at the very start of this reverse grid race spelled the end of their running this evening, as we have some donuts from Alex Smith and Anna Matthews. Much appreciated. Thank you, gents, for that. And is that James Atkins getting involved? It is. Yes, it is. There, as we see Alex Smith nearly finding a wall there. Just about avoids it there, and there we have some donuts. Fantastic, cracking to see that. Steve Knight coming home P9 there. Andrew Harvey in just a second will be coming home P10. I'm sorry, I want to see some donuts. Oh, we're all going to be synchronised. That is, nearly synchronised. You've got to work on your form now. I'll give that a 5. I'll give that a 5. As Andrew Harvey still not across the line yet. I should probably be watching cars come across the line, but this is also very exciting, isn't it, folks? As we see those rear tyres really getting a bit of a workout now. If they weren't already a little bit hot and a little bit bothered, they're now very much so, as it seems to be that Alex's have actually burst at this stage. And Andrew Harvey comes home P10 there. So, I think we'd have some more donuts, actually, from Alex Smith. Yeah, sure. I have no issues with that. We're all done for donuts now. So, that was a very good way to end a very good evening of racing here at Paul Ricard. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have enjoyed commentating on it. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you in a fortnight's time for some more single-seater action, and a week's time for some more touring car action. Thank you very much for tuning in, folks, and good night.